Have you ever noticed how grandma's weight watching remarks and mom's schizophrenic outbursts interrupt Thanksgiving dinner? Probably not, because while all of our families are strange, not all of them have the dysfunction that mine does. Throughout my childhood, I've had my share of problems. I've lived in denial that my family was anything other than the ordinary. I've been kidnapped. Half of my family consists of criminals, and I bounced from house to house my second half of high school. The first inkling of my dysfunction arose at the age of 3 when my mom and her seemingly police officer boyfriend showed up at my grandmother's house and kidnapped my younger brother and I and took us to Austin for the weekend. No harm, no foul. She brought us back that Monday. We weren't harmed. I assumed that she was allowed to take us, and my dad was just kind of bitter from the divorce. That wasn't really the case. She didn't have custody, and she was on probation for a while after that. And so, for those of you that don't know, kidnapping is breaking your probation. She wasn't around for very long. From a relatively young age, I learned that half of my family consisted of criminals or unsavory characters. My mother's a 3-time felon. You would think that she has a punch card for that somewhere by now. I'm from DeKalb, Texas. If there ever was a town worthy of the infamy of Walter White, it would be this town. Pretty much anyone on my mother's side of the family is a criminal. There's Connie the con artist, my maternal grandmother. There's Penny the penniless, my mother. And Stacy the shoplifter, my maternal aunt. My thought process at the time was just that every family has a black sheep or two, just not a monopoly on black wool like mine apparently had. Lastly, during my junior and senior years of high school, I moved houses 7 times. At the time, I had a pretty pessimistic, wormy attitude, and so I just thought the world was kind of out to get me, and I got out of my angsty phase. And my grandmother was who I originally lived with, and she kicked me out to live with my criminal parents. I say criminal parents because both of them were on drugs. My mother was a felon. They didn't have a good household. I was having anxiety attacks all of the time, and so moving out was just a better solution. And so I bounced from my parents' house to my aunt's house, which my younger brother stayed at. And then after that whole situation, and my little brother and I couldn't get along, I moved back to my grandmother's after an apology, stayed there for a little while, made the same path again because apparently I'm difficult, and then landed at my boyfriend's house, or my boyfriend's family's house, and stayed there for about a year until I moved off to college at Southern Arkansas University. I say I lived with my parents because they reconciled whenever I was 15, and despite the fact that she's paranoid schizophrenic and had a record, my dad decided to get back with her, and so looking back on it, that makes me question his sanity more so than hers. All of these transitions enabled me to be more independent, and gave me time to realize that my family was far from the norm, obviously. While other people's families had minor issues and they would stay in a home for probably years before they moved, I moved within weeks, like I said. I justify my slow realization on the fact that I had a solid school experience to balance out all of the crazy in my home life. I was involved in several organizations, I had a solid background, extracurriculars, good group of friends. That kind of kept me balanced. And long story short, learn your local laws so that you don't give your kids away for no reason. Shared blood doesn't equivocate for shared values. Just because they're your mom or dad doesn't mean that they're a good person. Don't be ignorant of the red flags surrounding you, no matter where they come from. And this concludes my speech.